you have had a very strong role in leadership for a very long time. I feel like it's been decades now. And I'm wondering right out of the gate, what is leadership to you? Would you be able to define that?
Yeah, I think there's a famous philosophical question, Christy, where people ask, are leaders made or born? I think I personally answered that for myself a long time ago. I think leadership is an opportunity for any person to influence another person in a variety of situations, whether it's within the work environment, which is typically how, I think leadership is thought about when the word is brought up. But, frankly, I think leaders evolve and emerge in many other kinds of environments, most of which are more important, frankly. When you think of situations where there might be a crisis and people who may have not been together or organized themselves in some way are required to immediately respond to the crisis, leaders emerge from the group. I think about parenting is probably the most important leadership role that I've ever endeavored on. And so anytime a person influences another person or has the opportunity, I define that as leadership. In that context, I think I've come to realize that we have the opportunity to leave another human being one of three ways when we've had the privilege of interacting with them, even if it's casually. One is we can leave them basically the same as they were before they entered into the dialogue or the interaction. Secondly, we can leave them worse off. I think it's often a look that was unintended but misinterpreted could set somebody on their heels that maybe respects you and looks at you as someone that they really look up to, and that could set them back. A careless word, a less than deep presence that people often respond to. Maybe you're looking at your phone, or you're thinking about other things that you need to do, or even thinking about what you want to say versus hearing what the other person's saying. So you're leaving them a little bit less better off than maybe they were, or confused. And the third way is better off in some meaningful way, whether it is advice that you brought into the conversation that was important for them to learn from, or to at least consider, or whether it was just hearing them, and validating that what they're saying is understood, and you've demonstrated some empathy. So I think what's important in leadership is recognizing how important it is whenever you interact with somebody to give them your best. In organizations, businesses specifically, as you rise and ascend in responsibility, it's interesting that you have less and less opportunity to demonstrate or to behave in a way that does one of those three things for somebody within the context of the organization, or a stakeholder that is important to the organization's success. That means it's really more important as you ascend in an organization to be keenly aware of the impact that you're having on others, even in the few instances that you have the opportunity to cross paths with them. And some people take that for granted. They really don't understand that that's the case. And worse, sometimes their public persona defies or is different from what people perceive them to be privately in those few moments that they have to interact with them. And that disingenuous behavior creates distrust. It diminishes a person's credibility. And it's really a recipe for disaster. In upstate New York, I love the fact that we tend to be very, very aware of people who are disingenuous, inauthentic. We hold in very high regard people who are true and believable and genuine, regardless of the circumstances. In other places where I've had the ability to live and run businesses, Boston, for instance, and Boston's a great place, probably the intellectual capital of the world. I know that there's people who ascend to high levels of organizations, and they are different in the public realm than they are in the private realm. And it works for them, and it's not as discounted in that environment as it is here in upstate New York, which is one of the reasons I love upstate New
York. I was scribbling over here with so many questions that I added on while you were speaking, because you shared so much. I love the focus on influence. Anytime that it can be reframed, oftentimes when we think of leadership, especially if there's a power differential and someone is in the classic hierarchy of the lower ranks, quote unquote, in a business or an organization, we often look at leadership as like power. There've been so many moments where I've had clients that are like, I would never be able to get there. And then when you somewhat level the playing field mentally and say it's an influence, you really do see a shift in people's perspective. So I love you kicking it off right there. I think it's so true. And I had a few questions for you, and I am wondering, because I feel like that's something to unpack, is it sounded like you were saying as you rise up, your opportunity to have an influence with, I would say, more of a quantity of people within the organization slims down, if I was hearing you right. So what could be some ways that if someone is rising up and also wants to keep their finger on the pulse of the organization, or they want to make a point of connecting with people no matter where they are, what value they bring within the organization, how could leaders who are rising up, C-suite, senior VPs, how can they do that?
Yeah, there's this concept called skip level meetings, which simply means that a leader at any level of the organization should and can interact with levels below them that are indirect, right? It's not only the level that directly reports into you that matters, it's the levels below the level that reports into you that matters. I was senior vice president of human resources for Raymore and Flanagan for 10 years. And we had our own plane because our footprint was pretty tight in terms of 5 states. And the plane allowed us to take, a group of leaders to the various regions within the 5 states within a day, right? So you could go down in the morning to, say, Philadelphia, walk the market, be back home for a reasonably timed dinner with your family. It was great. And so a couple of times a week, I would sign up for the plane and go to various regions. And often the CEO, Neil Goldberg, would be on the plane with me. Now, we were probably at the time about 5,000 associates. And when we would enter a region, we would be careful to hit, the distribution center, a number of the stores, and, try to make a very good day of cross-section of the entire market. Neil, invariably, anytime we entered any of our facilities, would go directly to the frontline people. Whether it's the people loading the trucks on the dock in a warehouse, whether it's the salespeople on the floor within a store. And he would spend the good part of, a half a day while we were in the market dialoguing with those folks. And then in the afternoon, we would gather as a leadership team, and Neil would talk with the leaders, in charge of the region, and typically ask questions that he already knew the answers to, like, why did we, have such a low, metric score in this particular area, in this particular store last week? And he had already, learned from the people who were at the point of contact what the answer to those questions were. And God forbid you as a leader in that region didn't know the answer. Or if you didn't, try to make one up. That was worse. The lesser evil was to say, you know what, Neil, I'm not really sure. I will get back to you, and I will find out that answer before you leave today. That was acceptable for a while, but it's very important in leadership, I think, when you have opportunity to interact at the skip levels, to do so. And as I said earlier, how you do that in the small space of time that you have available as a busy executive really determines your credibility as a leader within the organization.
Absolutely. And I love that was the first stop, was going right to the floor. It makes so much sense from the way you're sharing it. Is it that easy? Is it really that easy?
Well, Christy, I've come to believe that for certain types of people, it is. And I think this extrovert, introvert idea comes into play. I read the book Quiet Leadership quite some time ago, and the whole idea of introvert and extrovert is where do you get your energy? And I'm an extrovert, so when I'm with people, interacting with people, I can feel my energy rising in a good way, and I really enjoy that. Whereas Lori, my wife, she can do that. But at the end of the day, for her to recharge, because her energy has been depleted by that, she has to really, isolate or be by herself and just, feel like the batteries can be recharged from isolation. So I think it's easy for some, and I think it's very difficult and has to be very intentional for others, but it definitely is important for everyone.
100%. And that leads right into, I jotted down core values when you were speaking earlier about how you define a leader. And I guess it would be, no matter where you are on the spectrum of introvert, extrovert, what does core values have to do with it? Like, what are the benefits of understanding what your core values are, so moments like those do become easier? Do they come into play at all?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Some of the best and most effective and influential leaders that I've had the privilege of, working around, working with, studying, all basically have one or two things in common. The first is they're very, very clear on what matters to them. And I would say that is a definition of values, your value system. I call them, your personal truths. And when you understand those things deeply, and they're inside all of us. Sometimes they get sort of covered up and lost in the moments of life that we choose to focus on beyond what's really deeply inside us, but they're inside all of us. The leaders who are very, very clear and very much committed to living their lives professionally and personally, consistent with those things, are the most effective and I think influential. Coupled with that, and this is kind of the secret sauce that I wrote about in my book, Leading the High Energy Culture, is we're all born with certain strengths and talents that are innate to who we are. And it doesn't matter how you believe they got there. I personally am a spiritual person, so I believe they're God-given. But I also know that each of us has them. And these are things that we're very, very capable of doing and building on to become a really unique strength of ours, that when we apply that to what matters, to our value system, we become, much more effective. And frankly, self-efficacy, our desire, to continue to grow in our effectiveness in that realm, is intensified. The third dimension, which you didn't ask about, but I think you and I have talked about in the past, is when those two things are then aligned with the organization's values or purpose. That's when the energy is really intensified. That's when people, as leaders, emerge that are really influential, really effective, and it resonates. It has a magnetism that pulls in similar types of people, and it creates a culture and an atmosphere that is really successful and really energizing, and frankly makes for the potential for high performance.
There's so much to two parts. There's so much to what you're saying. Two that's standing out to me is, one is it brings more of a whole leader into whatever they're doing by understanding and pairing everything together versus fragmented. And the second is there's an authenticity within the culture that is organic. So it is intentional. It's also organic, that really ripples out in regards to stakeholders and partnerships and board members and hiring and retention, and everything is affected by that. So I love that. And it's a wonderful segue to what you do. So the businesses that you run, and Rock City Development and Denelli Partners. And I would love to know, when we're talking about core values and we're talking about leadership, what's the bridge that connects both of these companies for you? Like, is there some sort of overarching mission or purpose?
Absolutely. It's interesting when we do, workshops and leader development sessions. One of the slides that we have up on the screen is the picture of an apple and an orange. And we ask the people in the audience, what do you think of when you see this picture? And people say, well, mutually exclusive things, two things that are, inherently different. Right. But let's, sort of flip the script for a second, and let's try to look at an apple and an orange and see, how they're similar. What do you come up with? And generally there's a little bit of a pause, and then maybe somebody will sort of quietly say, well, they're both fruits. Yes. What else? And then somebody else might say, well, they both grow on trees. Yes. And then momentum starts to pick up, and they really start to, think about how they're similar. Oh, they're both round. Oh, they both have skins. They both have seeds. They both produce juices that are healthy, and so on and so forth. And so it's not long before the point of the exercise sort of emerges where, when you think about something maybe a little differently, there's more integration than separation. And frankly, that's become a theme for me at this stage of my life that is really important for me to drive unity versus divisiveness. However, that's not the point of this answer. The point of this answer is that when we created Rock City Development, we created a real estate development company with the intention of sort of purchasing a portfolio of assets within a community, which is Little Falls, that are unique and can be maintained because some of them are historic, like 1839 vintage stone mill on the Mohawk River. And some of them are new and contemporary, like a 25 single family home development, on the north side of the village. But all of them are, sort of focused on real estate development. And as we acquired those assets, we realized that, what makes them unique, additional to, the fact that they're unique within the context of, the geography of Little Falls, which is itself unique. What makes it more unique is the people that operate them. So within the stone mill that we have on the Mohawk River, we have a cafe, we have a 9-room inn, we have a commercial business with 75 employees. We have a bunch of operating entities, 10 now. And so it became obvious to us pretty early on that having people that lead these organizations consistent with, frankly, the purpose of the symbiotic nature of these assets and the mission of revitalizing this community and accelerating its revitalization in a direction that contemporizes it, consistent with a quality of life that people remember from living in a community like Little Falls, is really, really important. So leader development in this context became really, really important. So Dinelli then emerged as, the resource to help the people within the organizations that operate these real estate entities really grow in ways that, frankly, they're capable of, that actually improve the performance and results of the organizations within those entities. But more importantly, even as we've evolved, which is really exciting to our ownership, is these folks, evolve to a place where they begin to see themselves as capable of ascending to a level of capability that they never anticipated they could, and even more, giving them potentially ownership, in actual ownership, not fake ownership, actual ownership in the entities, gives this a real evergreen nature, so that these operations are run by people that hopefully generationally will continue to build on what we've created. And ultimately, the community element of Little Falls will be not only reestablished as it was in its heyday, but it'll be better.
Oh my gosh, Dave. So it's just so good. Again, scribbling over here as quickly as possible with everything you're saying. It's such a natural connector. It's such a natural link. And I'm going to just play back to you key lights that were like, yes, yes, yes. Right. So within everything you said, when you were first talking about Rock City, this idea of there's so much respect and integrity that is held for the history of the community. So it's like taking pride within that. And so you're speaking generations forward too. It's also just appreciating and bringing the generations that came before and paying them respect by appreciating what they created. And so I keep seeing this like baton handoff, right? So it's like taking the baton from previous generations, handing it off to future. And within that, I love the idea. And I'll say I was very fortunate to get a tour with you of all of these buildings and to just learn firsthand the history of them and to see them in action. And it was I was so proud. It was just such a wonderful experience because it was also super unique. So when I think about having the respect and the integrity, I also mean aesthetically as well. You're respecting the buildings and you're respecting the history of the architecture while also, like you said, contemporizing it so that it has this progressive feel. It's very unique. It's just very authentic. It's very unique. And I love the meaning and the purpose behind it. There's also this sense of connecting the leaders and the organizations within the buildings, right, to and beyond, which we'll get into, to it almost brushes off or reaffirms the pride of where we live in upstate New York.
Yes.
It creates this sense, we all know that where we live sometimes gets a lot of slack, a lot of flack. I think it's flack. Is it flack?
Flat.
Yeah. So where we live gets a lot of flack. And at the same time, I continue to meet people who live here who are looking through a lens, because, like attracts like, I'm aware of that, but looking through this lens of possibility, of opportunity, of appreciation, and awesome, we're taking something that's been created and how can we bring it forward? So I keep seeing that baton. And then also the people within the organizations, the leaders who are emerging, the leaders who are established. I love the idea that you shined such a bright light on, of having them reappreciate what they're contributing, like the value that they bring. It's just such a wonderful way to unite. Like you were saying, we need no more division. So the sense of unity, the sense of cohesiveness, the sense of power in numbers, and from a place of the sum of all the parts, like everybody is contributing, everybody has some sort of value, and bringing that together creates what you're creating and beyond. So it's wonderful.
Thank you. You hit it, right on. And one of the things I would really want to sort of express in a way that is hopefully helpful for people, your listeners, to understand not only about me and how I view things, but about us, and what I have come to really believe is uniquely special about us. And when I say us, I mean we that choose to be part of, Central New York, specifically the Mohawk Valley. Lori and I have had the opportunity to live in different places. We lived in Cincinnati for 4.5 years, which was a wonderful place. We lived in Boston for 8, wonderful place. Because of my business career, I've had the occasion to travel to places all over the world and to teach leader development, to teach, some of the concepts in my book, but even before that, to lead organizations that do manufacturing, et cetera. I'm talking places like even, Kenya, Africa, Sao Paulo, South America, Kuwait, been to Dubai 3 times and done work there, of course, Europe and places like that. It's come around in my world that what's clear to me is that there is something different about Central New York and our people here. And I've come to define it this way. The fact that the socioeconomic spectrum is pretty broad. And there are people at the top end, there's no doubt about it. But it's pretty much skewed to the middle, maybe even lower middle, and to the lower income side of the spectrum. And one of the things that we say often in our companies is that greatness is not reserved for others. Everyone in my world, particularly in this part of the world geographically, has the capability to be great, and therefore they should be given the opportunity to be great. And I think most of the reason why they fall within certain maybe lower levels of the socioeconomic spectrum is to no fault of their own. Maybe they were born into it, whatever it might be. Regardless, when you give people at all levels certain principles, and they grasp those principles, and they start to, believe in themselves in a way that maybe they hadn't before they learned those principles, they start to rise in the Maslow's pyramid of hierarchy, to the next level. For instance, giving living residences that are higher quality, and affordable is, I think, a gift to people in certain segments of the population that hadn't had that, privilege. And when they
100%.
have that, and you treat them like what I call market rate tenants or residences, they start to rise their level of next focus. And in the area, the integration of everyone on that spectrum is really, I think, part of the secret sauce that makes us special. Because regardless of where you sit, our values here in upstate New York, born probably from generations well before ours, are similar. And I call it the Stewart's test. Stewart's is a local, convenience store that's, very successful. And I can walk into Stewart's dressed like this, and somebody coming out of Stewart's can be dressed in a one-piece Carhartt suit, with, hands that are obviously working person's hands. And they'll hold the door for me. Say, "Hey, Dave, how you doing today?" "I'm doing great." "How are you doing, Jim?" "Good." That didn't happen in a lot of the places that I lived before. And here we kind of respect each other for similar reasons. And when we show respect for each other, it creates a community of, a quality of life that represents and is similar to the one that we grew up in. And I want to continue to build on that. So to create, communities that have that fundamentally, but are now contemporized in a way where, they allow for, technology, and they allow for healthcare, and they allow for security, and the kinds of things that are important, good school systems that are really, delivering quality education, which we have a lot of those in the area. Those are the kinds of things where I think, we can improve and continue to build on without, subordinating this fundamental concept that is these values that we all share at all levels of the economic spectrum.
Totally. And I'm hearing so much like flashing lights of equity, inclusivity, everything that we're hearing that can really be a checkbox for a lot of business leaders, to be honest. Like this panic, like we got to make sure we're empathetic. We got to make sure we're doing DEI. And there is a sense of natural humanness that I do believe we have in Central New York that does have that does really support being equitable in a sense of how you treat each other. And there's also, I feel like, a very good, we're great detectors for BS. We can sense that, like you were saying about authenticity. We just can. I think everybody can, but I do believe there is something about the simplicity and slowness of our community that sometimes when you're in more of a metropolitan area, it's so fast that we're able to take people in at a slower speed. And so we can sense it faster in a way. That's my feeling, because I've lived in cities too, and you're usually whizzing by people. And so you don't really get to take them in. So I feel like there's so much to that, without a doubt, which leads us also to so much of what you're doing, which I'm noticing is the bridge, and correct me if I'm mishearing this, between your two companies, is rising Central New York up in every sense of the word.
Absolutely.
Okay. So what needs doing in Central New York?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think there's a lot that is going well. I think a lot of these programs, like the downtown revitalization initiatives that are, starting to hit, the various areas. Clinton got one, Utica got one, Little Falls got one, Gloversville got one. Other forms of, I think, investment in the area that is born of the economic opportunity zone incentives, where a lot of Central New York, qualifies, has attracted private investment that's really, I think, starting to show. Utica downtown, a lot of the development there Even, Little Falls and Herkimer is starting to show some signs of that. You have the business parks in, Frankfurt and Schuyler that are tremendous. Hats off to the folks that are responsible for that. John Pisak and others. I think it's fantastic. All of that is good. The nanotech, Wolfspeed, more jobs than, really employable people at the moment. I think in many ways, if you talk to a lot of business owners, like I do, one of their biggest, concerns is, I can't find enough qualified help. And, I'm 60 years old. I've spent a lot of time in this area. I would have to, say that, in my lifetime, I don't remember a dearth of employable help that exists now. It's important. Houses and residences selling above market and in fewer days than ever before that I can remember. All good stuff. So I think a couple of things that are really needed are for communities in the central New York area to really focus on residential development in a way that satisfies the demand to bring people from outside the area into the area and to enjoy the quality of life that I talked about earlier. And I think once you bring people in and they're living here, the better part of a year, they're going to require services. They're going to eat at restaurants. They're going to need clothing. They're going to buy food, pharmaceuticals. They're going to want entertainment. There's a critical mass, I believe, Christy, that we have to aspire to in terms of population that I think is really important to achieve. So anything that developers can do to provide additional housing inventory, I think, is really important. And there's people doing that already. I'm friends with Joe Gem from La Hinch Group, and they've created a lot of properties, residential properties downtown. I'm friends with the Lewis family who, builds townhomes and single-family residences. There's a lot of residential development professionals in the area that could contribute to this. That's one. The second thing that I would point to, and I said this earlier in the conversation, is unity. I think fundamentally we have to work together, private, companies, investors, business people, not-for-profit leaders that provide services of all sorts to people in need. So much respect for, some of these nonprofits in the area that do such a fantastic job, and not to isolate a few, but, CABD and ICANN and Human Technologies and places like this, just fantastic, helping, people in need in ways that are exemplary. And then the municipalities, the people in governmental leadership seats, keeping an open mind, looking for solutions rather than fighting, the political sides of the aisle that, seem to be the way politics has gone in, the recent past, unfortunately. Not looking for ways to sling mud, but rather looking at ways to find solutions and unify the various factions that are, all fundamentally dedicated to the welfare of the people in this area and to the communities that exist in this area and to their, upbuilding. And I see my role personally, not only as one of those players, but I say I'm a steward and an upbuilder. A steward to try to, sort of ensure that, we maintain a unified spirit and recognize where we agree and build on those areas versus pointing out where we're different and, not alike, and trying to, diminish the other side for whatever reason. And upbuilding, I point back to urban renewal in the 60s, which, not sure how it all came about, but, it really demolished, the architecture that was part of the communities that, were historically vital in this area, with the idea of reconfiguring them in a way that, I guess made sense back then. However, has evolved in ways now that really for the future doesn't make sense. So upbuilding, in my mind, means, not only developing structures and residences and residential communities and, manufacturing and distribution, but also upbuilding the people that are capable of running them in ways.
That's the connector between your two companies.
Exactly.
Like that is the connector. It's like rising our area up by upbuilding. Like if that was one word, that's
it.
It's it. It's inside out. It's inside out. Upbuilding from the inside out, from the outside in, either way, right?
Yes.
I love that. I feel like that is it's so clear. It makes so much sense that you would, without even connecting it that way, it just is so naturally part of both. So it makes so much sense. Dave, thank you so much. If you were going to leave anyone listening with like what's one small clear action that they can take within Central New York, or if this is someone who's listening who's outside of Central New York, but maybe they see and are hearing similarities to the town that they live in, what could they do? And you can gear it towards Central New York if you want, but what's one thing that they could do?
Act with love. I think that we all have that choice. And I think the more of us that can choose that, the better off we'll all be. And we all are capable of that if we search deep enough within our souls. And so that would be my advice. Figure it out, dedicate yourself to it, and do the best you can every day. And we'll all be better off as a result.
Yes. I love figure it out, because some people do have that moment of like, what does that mean? Figure it out. You know what it means to you without a doubt. And then dedicate yourself once you realize that. I love that. And it is something that everybody can do. And I'm with you 100%. So when people want to learn more about you, more about Rock City, more about Dinelli, where can they go?
Yeah, I think the first place is our website. So DinelliPartners.com is one, and Dinelli spelled DANELI, partners.com, or rockcity.dev, DEV. All of our contact information is on there, and we would love to hear from you.
Fantastic. And you're also on LinkedIn. So if people want to start following you on LinkedIn, they want to DM you on LinkedIn. And also I'll put a link to both of those as well as to your book in the show notes. So when people want to learn more, they can go ahead and have easy access to that.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Christy, and really appreciate Ryan Miller, who brought you and I together in terms of a mutual friend. And I really respect what you're doing with your business, with your podcast, and frankly, with your capabilities as a leader in this area. And I really would love for your listeners to understand the importance of what you're bringing to the marketplace, because it's all good stuff. And thanks for having me on. I'm privileged to be part of it.